Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about some quarterback rumors out there that could involve your Atlanta Falcons, one of which being a guy named Trey Lance, a former third overall pick, of course, who might be on the move. So could the Falcons be interested in trading for Lance? And speaking of top 3 picks, the number 2 pick in this year's draft from the Houston Texans could be up for grabs. So could we see the Falcons jumping up to get a guy like CJ Stroud? Now, before we get to all those quarterback rumors, our Saints channel here at Chat Sports picked up 37 subscribers yesterday by bad-mouthing your Atlanta Falcons. So let's rise up and let's beat Trey Stroud and Saints now here in subscribers. Hit that sub button if you love Atlanta Falcons. Okay, moving on to some quarterback rumors here. Ian Rapoport tweeting out this morning, sources, the 49ers have received inquiries from several teams looking into a potential trade for former number 3 pick Trey Lance. The conversations have been the result of San Francisco fielding the calls, not making them, with teams aware that Brock Purdy is likely the future starter. So could the Falcons look to trade for Trey Lance? I don't think Atlanta is removed from any sort of quarterback conversation. Desmond Ridder is QB1 right now, but I don't think anyone sitting in Flowery Branch is thinking this is a closed case. There is no other possibilities. We've got our guy. They will leave no stone unturned in their pursuit of the best quarterback for 2023. So Trey Lance, let's get to the nuts and bolts on the former third overall pick. He's only played in 8 games through 2 seasons. He had a season-ending ankle injury in week 2, as we all recall, but he's had some ups and downs so far in his NFL career. Now, here is why Trey Lance is intriguing, right? He's a very gifted quarterback. He did not go number 3 overall because he was super productive at North Dakota State. It's an unbelievable arm talent and just the ability to flick the football 70 yards down the field, it looks like at times. He's also really young. He's just 22 years old at this moment, which feels like it's way too young for a guy that's been under the hot seat for this amount of time. Now, he has untapped potential and ability like we talked about. If he was a rookie right now, this is where I want to get to. If he was in this draft class, where would he go? I think he would go right there with CJ Stroud and Bryce Young if he was entering this year's draft class, knowing what we know about him, because I don't think Will Levis and Anthony Richardson are that much more appealing. So maybe he'd be QB3 or maybe QB2 in some eyes in this year's draft class. He's got the arm strength, he's got the mobility, he's got all that stuff. That's the good stuff, right? Here's where the concerns come in for Trey Lance. Injuries. Unfortunately, Lance has not played a ton of football. He has only played in 27 organized football games between college and the NFL since 2018. In that same time span, he's been able to play, or he was scheduled to play in around 70 games, right? Excluding what happened with COVID and then, of course, the injuries so far in the NFL in sitting behind Jimmy Garoppolo. Only 21 starts in total since 2019, so we don't have a ton of tape on the player. And he's played in one game played only one game in 2020, just 4 NFL starts. So he is a very raw product that would need some working on for sure for any coach or any QB coach for that matter. So what say you? Would you be interested in trading for Trey Lance? I'm going to let you guys be Terry Fontenot for a moment here. Be the GM. Would you want to go out and make a trade for a guy like Trey Lance? Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Now, through 4 career starts in the NFL so far, it hasn't been great, but it also hasn't been awful. 797 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. He simply has just not played enough to really get a good full picture on the player. I personally am not that high on Trey Lance. I wasn't crazy about him coming out, but I don't think anyone can definitively say who Trey Lance is as a quarterback in the NFL. Now, when you compare Desmond Ridder to Trey Lance, oddly enough, they both have 4 career starts, and they are pretty similar in players, right? I mean, not overwhelming stats one way or the other. The element that Trey Lance offers is what he can do with his legs. 235 rushing yards through 4 starts so far in the NFL. Ridder doesn't really come close to that. But just by the numbers, they actually are maybe a bit closer than your average football fan would think. So both Ridder and Lance, at this point in their careers, are pretty unproven guys. I think we can all agree on. There are risks involved, but a former third overall pick, right? And the other was a third round pick. Now, maybe the NFL draft got it wrong, but I think you have to at least, look into the option of looking into the option of trading for Trey Lance just to see what he could have untapped for you. Now, you would have to lose a draft pick, of course, to get a player like Trey Lance. The 49ers are in a weird spot where they're not dying to trade him, but they also may have found their Tom Brady, right? Their day 3 Cinderella quarterback, and they don't feel the need to hold on to Trey Lance when they are really in love with Brock Purdy. So what does it cost to get Trey Lance? That is the big question, because I think we can all agree, whether you like Lance or not, whether you think he's going to be a good quarterback, he definitely has some undeniable physical tools and traits that make it intriguing to go, well, what is the price where you go, it's worth giving up that pick to see if Trey Lance could look and play like a guy who goes third overall in the draft. So here's my best, prediction of what it could cost to land Trey Lance. I'm going to have the Falcons give up their third round pick. I definitely wouldn't do it for a first. I don't even think I'd do it for a second. But for a third round pick, I think that's worth the risk right there, right? It's not like that third round pick is a guaranteed Hall of Famer anyway, whereas the quarterback position is a very important position to get down. So you could get an all-time highway robbery if you land Trey Lance, who unfortunately just sat behind Jimmy G his first year as planned, snapped his ankle in half in year 2, and everyone else sort of wrote him off, and the Falcons go, we'll take we'll give a third round pick for a former third overall pick. So would you accept this trade? If the 49ers pick up the phone and call Atlanta and say, listen, we'll send you Trey Lance for a third round pick, would you do that deal? A for accept or D for decline? Next up on the show, I want to talk about a different quarterback trade potential. This would be a trade up to get CJ Stroud, because there's some buzz out there as the NFL draft gets closer and closer that the Houston Texans are not in the business of picking a quarterback at number 2 maybe, and they could move back to get their guy at 12. So before we get to all of that, let's talk about the NFL draft hats. We have been plugging this for a couple of weeks now, and I'm here to say one last time that you want to get your Falcons draft hat before supplies run out and you don't get one at all, and then you're the only guy at the draft party, right? Because we all know everyone wears their draft hats to the draft party, not wearing their own Atlanta Falcons cap. So go to chatsports.com/ATL hat. So Dov tweeting out that the Falcons' dream scenario for the 2023 draft would be to pick Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, source tells NFL Draft Scout. The source told Miller that the team is comfortable with Desmond Ridder and will only pick a QB in the top 10 if it's Young or Stroud. They currently pick at 8. So there's no way Bryce Young or CJ Stroud fall to 8. So if they love one of them, they would have to move up to get one of these two players. So you combine that report, which is more just a rumor right now. We can't say definitively that is what's going on in the Falcons war room, but sometimes when there's smoke, there is fire. And the reports of the Texans actually want to trade out of the number 2 pick because they heard Bryce Young is going to Carolina at 1 and they don't love CJ Stroud enough to take him at 2. Well, that could be interesting. So let's discuss the idea of CJ Stroud ending up in Atlanta for a moment here, right? Look at Stroud's stats in his career from Ohio State. The numbers speak for themselves. An extremely proficient player for the Buckeyes. I mean, what is that, 44 plus 41? We're talking 85 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. You do not see those types of touchdown to interception ratios every single year. I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of who CJ Stroud is as a player. He's a very, very good pocket passer with great arm strength and good accuracy. Doesn't have maybe the greatest God-gifted natural playmaking ability, but all in all, he is going to be a good quarterback for a team. So if Terry Fontenot thinks, you know what, Stroud is our guy, well, then I don't have an issue with them trading up for him. Because if Terry Fontenot believes CJ Stroud is him, if I polled you guys before, the NFL draft chaos really started a few weeks ago and said, would you rather have CJ Stroud or Desmond Ridder, what would your answer be? Personally, I'm going to go with Stroud. No offense to Ritter. I know I've never been one of his biggest fans, and I think he's better than some other options out there. But if you can get CJ Stroud for the Falcons, I think that would be a really good move for Atlanta. Now, here's what I think it could cost for Atlanta to jump from number 8 to number 2. So a first-round pick swap, and then they give up a future first and this year's third. So all in all, it costs you a first and a third to get CJ Stroud, because you already got to use one pick on the player, so I'm not going to even say it costs 2 firsts. But you get CJ Stroud in exchange for, you give up a first and a third. Not a bad option right there, in my opinion. So it's a bit of a large price tag. I understand giving up a future first-round pick is never an easy thing to stomach, but this is what you have to do if you want a franchise quarterback, and you don't suck like the Jags and pick in the bottom 2 or 3 every single season. Sometimes you got to make some moves and move up and get your guy. And if all it costs is a future first and a third, you might look back and go, wow, would we rather have CJ Stroud, our franchise quarterback, or the opportunity to pick 9th overall again and get a good edge rusher or cornerback? I'm going to go quarterback every single time. So be the GM. What should the Falcons do with the number 8 pick? Should they trade it and try and get up to number 2 to land CJ Stroud? Or should they keep it? Because there is some benefits to staying where you are right now and building a good roster. And if Desmond Ritter is not the guy, then attacking the quarterback position next year. But if you think CJ Stroud is the guy, don't wait, right? Don't go into it with, well, we love CJ Stroud, but let's wait and see. You might live to regret that. Well, you might not have a job to regret if you're Terry Fontenot if you don't get the quarterback position down in a hurry. So make sure to subscribe if you have not already. We keep you guys informed and entertained for all things Falcons leading up to the NFL Draft.